Hello, how are you? Today I'm going to talk to you about the use of pork lard in food preparation. Many people have been asking me to talk more about this for some time. I even have a video here where I talk more about the best and worst oils for cooking. And in that video, many people commented saying that I didn't talk about pork lard. That's because it's not an oil. Lard is a different type of fat, an animal fat. So today I'm here to talk more about it, its main characteristics, whether it's really good for cooking or not, and what precautions you need to take. So stay until the end, because you won't want to miss it. If you love tips on nutrition, health, and fitness, you'll love this channel. Go ahead, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. I have new videos every day, you're going to love them. Let's start talking more about pork lard, which everyone asked me to talk about, everyone wants to know if they should use it or not, and there are always lots of testimonials in the comments. People talk about their grandmother who died at 102 years old and only cooked with pork lard. Or someone says that in their childhood, they preserved food with pork lard. There was no refrigerator and they were super healthy. So why does this happen? Because when we think about pork fat, many people think of saturated fat, of increased cholesterol. So why do people who consume pork lard tend to have better health than those who use those vegetable oils? Let's talk more about that. In case you don't know, pork lard is actually made from the fat of the pig, which is most commonly taken from that thick, white, subcutaneous fat layer. They carefully remove it, melt it down slowly, then separate it, and finally put it into jars to sell. And I'll even give you a tip for when you go to buy it if you decide to get your pork lard. Some people even make it at home. But if you're really going to buy it, I'll give you some useful tips on how to choose a good one, so you don't fall into some of the traps that can happen. And usually this pork lard has a very mild and delicious flavor. It really has that authentic pork fat taste. So there are people who love to use pork lard because it makes beans taste amazing. Just sauteing with it to use in beans, adding it to rice, even to chicken. You don't have to use pork lard only with pork. With vegetables, where you would use olive oil or any other fat like canola oil, sunflower oil, people use pork lard because it gives that seasoned pork flavor. And you'll get those benefits of not burning the food, giving it more flexibility, which fat usually provides, and improving the flavor. So it ends up being quite versatile for savory foods. Many people are able to use it in various different dishes, not just for preparing pork. Another interesting point about pork lard is that its smoke point is quite high, and that's something we really look for when preparing food. I want to make it very clear here that I'm not saying I'm in favor of you frying food with pork lard, because I'm not in favor of you frying food with anything. We can always saute, grill, bake, or even use those air fryers. I have a video here where I talk more about them. But if you need to saute something for a longer time, leave some food there for longer, lard will be more stable than olive oil itself, since olive oil has a lower smoke point. So in that sense, pork lard ends up being more stable. But let's talk a bit more about its composition. In nutritional terms, the proportion of fat, so you can understand it better as well. There are some very interesting details for us to discuss regarding the nutritional composition of pork lard, which may be surprising to many people. When we compare, for example, pork lard with butter, because many people, as you know, use butter for cooking, for sauteing, for browning things, for frying steak in butter, pork lard actually has 20% less saturated fat than butter. Isn't that interesting? And when we analyze the composition of fatty acids present in pork lard, we see that it contains oleic acid, which is a very interesting acid, and oleic fatty acid is also found in olive oil. And when we look at the proportion of saturated and monounsaturated fats, olive oil is extremely rich in monounsaturated fat. It is estimated that about 77% of its composition is monounsaturated fat, which is that fantastic fat for the heart, the kind of fat that protects us from certain cardiovascular diseases. I even talk more about this in my video on the Mediterranean diet, and I'll leave it down below in the description for you. And pork lard has about 48% of the same monounsaturated fat. So it's also very high in monounsaturated fat, and it actually has more monounsaturated fat than saturated fat. That's why people say that the fat composition of pork lard is so healthy and so interesting to consume. That being said, the fat profile of pork lard is much better than, for example, canola oil, or those oils people usually use for cooking, like sunflower oil and soybean oil. So it's much healthier overall because the type of fat is better for the heart and also better for inflammation. I even talk more about this in that video of mine about oils that I mentioned earlier, so I'll leave it here in the description for you. But there's a big caveat here. Even though it's a monounsaturated fat, obviously olive oil is still more refined and more interesting to consume. In my opinion, it's still the gold standard, the top choice of fat to use in your daily life. But pork lard also has a healthy and balanced proportion of fats for you to use in your cooking. But it is still, after all, a fat. So you can't really go overboard and use a whole tablespoon of pork lard just to cook a steak. After all, you wouldn't typically use that much oil when frying a steak. Instead, you'd just use a small amount, just a little bit. So be careful with the amount, because since it's a very palatable, very tasty fat, and people start to think it's very healthy, they end up confusing being healthy and more nutritious with being low in calories. And we already know that the consumption of fat, any kind, whether healthy or not, in the medium and long term, in larger amounts, can contribute to weight gain, which by itself is already a risk factor for cardiovascular diseases, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes. So everything in balance and moderation is best. So you might be able to use pork lard, but always taking into account the amount you use, as always. In addition, pork lard also contains other nutrients such as vitamin D, for example, which can be hard to find in some foods. Normally we get its precursors or we activate it through sunlight or consume it through supplements, but pork lard, just like egg yolk, is a good source of vitamin D. That's an interesting fact. And just like egg yolk, pork lard is rich in choline, which is an important nutrient for brain health. It's a nutrient that reduces the risk of cardiovascular diseases, liver diseases. That's why many people say that their grandmother used pork lard for cooking, or their grandfather or their mother, and it was very healthy because it really is very nutritious, as long as it's used in normal amounts in small quantities, like any fat. And also because usually those people who used a lot of lard in the past were more active than we are nowadays. So if you just sit on the couch watching TV, consuming everything with a lot of pork lard, a large amount of pork lard, you will inevitably gain weight. And so there will be this risk because being overweight is a risk factor for those diseases we've already mentioned. Whereas people in the past were usually more active, did more manual labor in their daily lives, whether taking care of the house or working in the fields, and they consumed pork lard. So there was a balance between diet and physical activity, which is something we should always maintain as well. So when it comes time for you to buy your pork lard, if you're excited and now want to start using pork lard in your daily life, I'm going to tell you how to choose good quality pork lard. Ideally, you should really try to buy pork lard that comes from pasture-raised pigs. Pigs that are happy, raised free range, and that have a good, balanced, and healthy diet, not just fed with lots of antibiotics and so on, which is important for quality. It's always better to buy from small producers. But if that's difficult for you, always remember to pay attention to the label when you buy it. It shouldn't contain anything other than pork lard. I say this because some larger companies, not the small producers, who usually don't do this, but the bigger companies, actually add hydrogenated fat, believe it or not, to make the pork lard more stable and to increase its yield. So even pork lard these days can contain trans fats, which is absurd. So once again, always read the label because sometimes we think we're buying one thing, but we're actually getting something else. And you know the harm that trans fats cause to your health. They are highly inflammatory, increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, and are the worst type of fat there is. I have videos where I talk more about this and also about how not to be fooled when buying processed foods, how to read the label. I'll leave those down below in the description for you as well. Remember that in addition to pork lard, other good fats for you to use in your daily life are olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, flaxseed oil. I talk more about this in my video on the best oils, and I'll leave those complimentary videos down below in the description as well. Let me know down below if you usually use pork lard or not, how you tend to use it in your daily life, and how much you usually use. This is an important detail. I would love to see your comment. Give the video a like as that really helps me, and share it with anyone who would enjoy it or needs it. Let's work together to expand this chain of good because that's what I want here with the channel. See you next time. Bye.